Hey guys, this is Jules. Welcome to my tutorial, While Loops and Infinity, as part of the student-submitted video tutorials. This video covers material up to and including Week 7 in the Introduction to Interactive Programming in Python. Some people have asked me to explain while loops, so I've put together this short tutorial to explain the basic syntax and when and why you would use while loops. Let's start with the why. You might be wondering, Jules, we've already learned for loops, so why do we need to know another loop? The answer is because for loops are too limited to do everything we want. A for loop can iterate through a ridiculously long list, but it still has to have a finite list. So I have to know initially the maximum number of times I want it to loop. But what happens if I don't know how many times I'll need? What if I might not even have to loop at all, but I don't know yet? Well, this is exactly what the while loop is made for. It's a loop that says, hey, when this certain situation exists, and as long as it exists, keep repeating this code, however long that may take. The syntax for a while loop is even easier than a for loop. All it takes is while, followed by some expression that evaluates to true, followed by a colon. That's it. Then inside the loop, you just put the block of code you want to repeat. One part of the syntax that might be a little bit confusing is this part here, about the expression that evaluates to true. It might be easiest if I just show you some examples. The easiest way to get a true expression is to make one. So I can make a variable and assign it to the Boolean value true. Another way is to use comparison operators. This includes less than, greater than, equals, does not equal, is, and is not. So I can make a couple of variables and use these in expressions that evaluate to true. While A is less than B, or while C does not equal D, for example. Okay, this seems pretty simple so far. But what if we want our loop to continue as long as our expression is false? That's simple too. All we have to do is put not in front of anything that evaluates to false. This makes it true. For example, let's say I have a variable called isRaining. As long as it isn't raining, I want to walk out of my house, not grab my umbrella, go to work, and come home. So while isRaining is false, I want to do these things. But once it actually is raining, I want to go back to bed. Now if isRaining is true when it's raining, then not isRaining must be true when it's not raining. Let's try another one. First, let's make a couple of variables and give them values. Craving chocolate equals true, dieting equals false. So while not dieting and craving chocolate, cram chocolate in face. Now here is a great point to bring up something that happens to every coder, the infinite loop. When we were using for loops, because they were finite and would only iterate through a specific number of things, that part of the code would eventually finish. Even if it took hours or even years, it would finish. But with while loops, they could go on forever. Now there's two kinds of forever. There's the intentional forever and the non-intentional forever. If I use a while loop to keep going until the user does something, that is technically an infinite loop, because the user might never do anything. In that case, the code would go on forever, but that is intentional because it isn't likely that the user would never do anything. But let's say I make a while loop like the last one. Dieting never changes to true, and craving never changes to false, and my repeated instructions are just to keep cramming chocolate in my face. This is an infinite loop. The problem with an infinite loop is that they make me fat. No, wait, that's not right. The problem with an infinite loop is that they don't have any way to stop. To keep from creating the non-intentional kind of forever infinite loop, we have to make sure there is an opportunity for the true expression to become false, so the while loop will stop. The way we do that is by putting some kind of changing element into our instruction block. For this example, I could put in a weight counter and a conditional statement that makes me start dieting if I reach a certain weight. Let me say this again. In order to prevent creating an infinite loop, you must change something within your instruction block. If nothing changes, the loop will go on forever. Now you know why we use while loops and how to use them. The last thing I want to talk about is when to use them. This is probably obvious at this point, but just in case it isn't, I'll explain it. Whenever you want to keep repeating a section of code until something changes, and you have no certainty of how long that might take, use a while loop. Also, when you want to iterate through something really long, use a while loop. Now wait a second, you say. Jules, why would I use a while loop for something I could just use a for loop for? You are really observant. I thought I could sneak that one past you without noticing. Seriously though, one advantage of a while loop is in how much resources it uses versus how much a for loop uses. With a for loop, the computer makes a copy of the items you want to iterate through, and then proceeds to cross them off as it executes the code. That way the computer remembers where it's at in the list. If a list only has a few things in it, that isn't a big deal. But what if the list has 1,000,000 things in it? Or 1,000,000,000? Now not only do you have the copy you made, now the computer has to make its own copy too. Now you need twice as many resources. But a while loop only checks one thing. Is this expression true? It doesn't have to copy anything. It doesn't have to remember anything. As long as the expression is true, it runs the block of instructions. So when you need to repeat a block of code, it's a good idea to think about the most efficient way to get it done. Often this means a while loop may be the better choice. Just remember, if you use a while loop, you have to make sure something is changing so that eventually the expression will be false and the loop will end. I hope this has helped your understanding of while loops. Thank you for watching, and if you enjoyed this tutorial, remember to upvote it in the forum thread. As always, comments are greatly appreciated in the forum or in the comment section below.